Well, coasters, hey, stunning day out there, and they tell me that the whitebait are not performing as they're meant to be. And today, I've got Judith Collins, uh, leader of the National Party, who's joined us again. Judith, at least you're not abandoning the coast.
No, definitely not. In fact, to tell you what, Bruce, the coast isn't abandoning me either. We just got another load of whitebait, frozen whitebait sent up from some of our mates on the coast, which of course were paid for. And I popped it into the freezer the day before yesterday.
Wow, oh, look, fantastic. Now, Judith, I was watching TV the other night, and Tova mentioned that you were heading back to Wellington to be overthrown. And I've been sitting back waiting to see what happened, and it's nothing again.
Yes, well, I think Tova O'Brien does seem a little obsessed with me, and it's getting to a stage of almost embarrassment. I understand she's got a new job. She's leaving her current job, and we wish her well. But I'm getting on doing my job, focusing on things that matter.
As you always have done. Now, what's it like in Auckland at the moment?
Yeah, well,
you booked your space?
79 days of lockdown. People have had enough of it. I'm in Auckland, obviously, with my family, and it's an overcast day and the humidity's high and the tempers are getting higher. And they're getting high because people feel utterly left out, ignored and lost and basically abandoned by the government, and particularly the Prime Minister. She's the MP for Mount Albert, which for coasters, it's a place in Auckland, and they haven't seen her for 79 days.
Wow. Look, are you having Christmas parades, or down in the South Island here, all of our Christmas parades are finished? All of our events have been cancelled.
Well, I think Christmas is going to be cancelled here, isn't it? It's the Grinch. I've pointed out that Jacinda Ardern is really the Grinch of Christmas. We've got Aucklanders now asking whether or not they're supposed to book their slot to be able to drive in a car across an Auckland border to the Waikato or go up north. Are they going to go to Coromandel for Christmas, or do they need to book now? And that's what's being told. So you've got 1.7 million Aucklanders who are being told that they're in lockdown. They've got no certainty that they're going to be able to have a Christmas with their families. Their family members who live outside of Auckland have no way of knowing whether or not they're allowed to come in and have Christmas together. And we've got a population that is largely double vaccinated. About 90% of Aucklanders are, almost 90%. And people are looking at this government and saying, what the hell is going on? And when are the adults going to take charge? Well, 2023, we will.
God, can't come soon enough. Now, I noted the passing of Dame Cath, and you had a lot to do with her, didn't you?
Yes, well, of course, she's a Labour girl and I'm a National girl, but we both come from the Waikato, and she went to Matamata College, as did I, although she was obviously several years before me, a few decades. But we'd often see each other at various events, civic events mostly, or arts events. She was always interested in things, and I always found her, someone I always went home and spoke to, or she'd come and speak to me. I just think that she was a trailblazer, first woman Governor General, she's the first woman elected Mayor of Auckland. She's a trailblazer at a time where a lot of women didn't have the same opportunities as we do now. And I just think good on her. She tried her best, she contributed, and she was never a wimp. And I always admire that in other people too.
Clearly a real New Zealander.
Yeah, absolutely. As Kiwi as.
Now, I know that up in Auckland there, you've got a lot of Indian families. Now, we have a lot in Hokitika. They add hugely to our economy and to our society. And today is Diwali, the start of Diwali. And I saw that you'd mentioned that early on.
Yes. So it is, I'd like to say to all of those, everyone who celebrates Diwali, happy Diwali Day. I am dressed in many colours today for Diwali Day, and this is actually Indian, as you might be able to guess. I'd also say to you is that normally I would be out, like you, Bruce, out at Diwali events. I'd be all over Auckland doing these, and would be doing lots of things, celebrations, and this would probably go on for the next few weeks. And in Auckland, where there's a large Indian population, none of these events are happening. So the best we can do is to send out a big shout out to particularly our Indian constituents to say Happy Diwali. It is also a celebration of the triumph of good over evil. So let's all keep that together. It's good will eventually triumph over evil.
Oh, look, what a wonderful message. It really was. Now, look, you're probably sick of it, but can we talk about Three Waters?
Yeah, no, I'm not sick of it. Let's talk about it.
You know, we've been picking up on the statements that have been made, and at the present time, well over half of the mayors in the country have joined together to have a look at how they can push back, and they're making good progress. We've been looking at the statements that have come out. Like, for instance, the government has been working with councils on this project for 4 years, and yet we know that the heads of agreement was signed in July of this year. It's the type of thing, Judith, that is very frustrating.
Well, Bruce, can I first off congratulate you on your leadership in this area? I know that there are other mayors and civic leaders who have also taken, a really good, strong leadership role in this, but you have been outstanding, Bruce, and you have called things for what they are, and you've told people the truth about the government's plans on Three Waters. What is clear is that this is a power and asset grab away from local government, local people, the ratepayers who paid for the assets, and to put them into centralised systems where there'll be 6 representatives from some councils, 6 representatives from iwi, and local people will be completely ignored. No accountability whatsoever to the people who, one, pay the bills, and secondly, have paid for those assets. And we all know that the government was very clear that they wanted to have all the councils together, everyone agreeing, and they weren't going to mandate it. They weren't going to legislate over top of councils. And that is exactly what they're doing. They've completely broken their pledge. They are now legislating to ignore the councils, and their consultation was clearly completely fake. No matter how much money they threw at councils, it was fake, because 60 of the 67 councils have said no to it, and still they're going ahead. And so my promise to you, Bruce, and to all those coasters listening, is that when I am the Prime Minister in 2023, then I will return those confiscated assets to the councils. We will reverse this, and we will return it. And if you say, is it going to be too late for you to do that, Judith? No, it will not. And I can say this because the government's own timeline allows this to happen, because their timeline says 2024, it'll be 2023. They're looking at for their completion. And secondly, Bruce, I've looked at this government and all the many promises they've made over the last 4 years. They seem completely incapable of doing anything except declaring a lockdown. So I don't think they're capable of actually doing what they say they're going to do.
Well, there was one bit of good news that came out. The World Health Organization has declared that New Zealand has got the second best drinking water in the world.
I wasn't even aware of that, Bruce, but thank you for letting me know. And I would say they would be right. I mean, you go anywhere around the world where we used to be able to travel, we were normally very careful about the local water out of the taps. In New Zealand, you can drink the water out of the taps. And I think the government's pathetic response of putting up television ads to try and respond to your councils and other councils and mayors standing up to them, trying to show that drinking water in New Zealand, there was sludge coming out of the taps. That is entirely false. I can drink the water on the West Coast when I visit. I can drink the water in Wellington. I can drink the water in Christchurch and Dunedin, and I do in Queenstown and Auckland and everywhere. And I have no problems in our drinking water in New Zealand.
Look, you can drink the water out of every creek on the coast.
That's right. It's so clear and beautiful.
It is. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at is what impact will the transfer of these assets or the confiscation of these assets have on, say, small council like Western District Council. And it's really interesting because the Minister and the PM have come out and said very clearly, don't worry, you'll still own the assets. Well, guess what? the information we've got now shows clearly that we are going to be absolutely we're going to be in trouble.
You're going to be in serious trouble. And, as you know, you've got the issues about debt levels, that you have to keep your debt and asset levels ratio. This is going to cause a severe problem. So you've got the debt and you won't have the assets. And no matter what the government promises about what they're going to do about those debt levels, it's not just that. These are assets that you have borrowed on to be able to do the other things, build other infrastructure as well as the water infrastructure. But these are all being paid for by ratepayers. And this is not an arrangement that the government is doing whereby suddenly the ratepayers get this huge amount of money back and huge amounts of assets back. They're not paying for them. They're confiscating your assets. And then they're going to give you the privilege of paying for the use of those assets. So the other thing I heard the other day from Nanaia Mahuta, the Minister for Local Government, is that she said that this was all going to mean that ratepayers would save cost and that would be cheaper for people. But then we found out that they were going to, they planned to add another 7,000 staff to do all this work. 7,000 staff extra to what there are now, and suddenly we're going to all pay less. Well, Bruce, I don't think New Zealanders are that stupid.
I think I just saw a pig fly past the window.
I'm afraid so.
The argument about councils getting a $2.5 billion payment from the Crown, we've been trying to flesh that out, and we've now found that there will be a payment made to various councils. It's only about 7 or 8 cents in the dollar of the value of the assets that are being confiscated, but we catch. You can only use it on projects approved by government, and they've got to be climate change related.
Right. Okay. So I'm sure, Bruce, that you and other mayors and councils will be saying, well, I think you can take your beads and blankets away and just we'll keep our assets. Thanks very much. This is a modern day 21st century effort at confiscation of people's property and property rights. And it is simply not acceptable. So number one thing, don't waste the time on anything else. We will reverse it. They should save the money. The government has also said this is all going to cost $183 billion, Bruce. So you think about that over the next 30 years to do all these wonderful things. Well, $183 billion at the moment, they've racked up about $110 billion in debt, up from about $50 billion when they took over. And he had another $183 billion on top of that. And as we know, the estimates of debt are often so wrong. We could have a country that actually is beggaring itself just to push through an agenda that is on that the Minister Nanaia Mahuta has.
And it's interesting because one of the biggest risks that some of the rating agencies have called out is that we are going to get inflation. In fact, we've got inflation greater than we've seen for a long time, and interest rates are already heading up.
Well, you'll remember David Lange. That's the last time that inflation rose so high, was when he was the Prime Minister. And now we have in Jacinda Ardern someone else who has lost control. So we have our inflation rate. Inflation rate was about 5.8%, and we haven't seen that for, 30 years basically.
Actually, the similarities between the Lange Roger Douglas combination and the Jacinda Maori Party come Greens combination is very, very scary.
I think you might have read that piece by Graham Adam in Democracy NZ. He was right. I don't know if you ever met David Lange. I actually interned for him in his electorate office when I was a law student, so I knew him. And I knew him again when we were both on the board of Housing New Zealand. Someone with great brilliance, great orator, incredibly charismatic. But unfortunately, he was being led by people who had their own agenda, and he lost control. And Jacinda Ardern has lost control. And if I say to you that she has a Maori caucus that is flexing its muscles and Anai Mahuta is the leader of that caucus, I would be right.
There wouldn't be many around the country who would disagree with you. So leading on from that, Judith, I want to talk about something that nobody wants to talk about, and the media can't. Well, the media can't talk about it because they've signed an agreement with when they got their 55 million, not to talk about anything that didn't support partnership concepts, Treaty of Waitangi principles that have been adopted by the government and changed by this government, and it's the He Puapua report. Now, in 2019, Cabinet established a working group on the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous people to put a plan together. And then on the 1st of November 2019, Minister Mahuta received a copy of it. My question is, were you aware of the copy? Winston Peters says he wasn't aware. No one was aware. And yet they went to the people knowing that this document existed and hiding it.
It's deceitful, isn't it? So, Winston Peters, for all his many faults, he would not have been at all happy with this. And what they've done is that he was the Deputy Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister and her favoured ministers kept this from him. That is an extraordinary act of deceit. And then we went into the election, and they didn't tell the people about this. They certainly didn't tell us about it. They didn't tell Parliament. And when we called time on this early this year, I was accused of being a racist, and I was accused of being separatist and all this, when of course it was the exact opposite. And the other thing is that the Prime Minister said it wasn't their policy. Well, it clearly is their policy because they're implementing it. If you read that report, it is very clear that this government is, under Jacinda Ardern, is implementing the He Puapua report one piece at a time. Yes, all without going to people.
It's disastrous. I can get 100 emails in a day from people really concerned about it. There was a time when we lived in an equal opportunity society, and if you worked hard and you did your best, you actually got ahead. It's gone at the present time.
People feel like, this government feels it's the most divisive government I've seen in my lifetime, Bruce. And people say that once these lockdowns, or once Australia will take New Zealanders, and I'm sure they're already starting to trickle, there'll be a whole lot of people who move to Australia, because ultimately people want to get ahead based on not who they are, not who their parents were, not anything else other than their own work ethic and their ability. And that's what we're seeing the death of in this country. So we need to change the government, and I'm going to make no bones about it. There's no way to do that except to basically say no to this, say no and stand up for it. And we will be marching in the streets about He Puapua, I'm sure of that. And doesn't matter what happens with these lockdowns. I don't think this is going to last for that much longer, because I think that this government is going to buckle on it, because these lockdowns are crippling people, and people realise that they're being played.
Another one of the He Puapua objectives is Maori ownership of the Foreshore and seabed. Now, we've got the vast majority of iwi and Maori are exactly on side with what we all think. There's a handful of extremists like Willie Jackson and a few of those others that have captured caucus that probably see the first time in a lifetime to take the opportunity to seize some things they've always wanted to do. And what's your view on this? The seabed and the foreshore?
Well, when we came into government following Helen Clark's loss in 2008, we sorted out the foreshore and seabed, and we had a deal. We got legislation through with the support of the Maori Party. We had it sorted. So why is it coming up again? And it's coming up again because some people have an agenda, and it's only a few people. But the problem is they're the people Jacinda Ardern listens to. And if the Prime Minister doesn't have a thought for the future of this country, I do. I feel very strongly that a country divided is not what any of us want. I think, I can't blame those people who, those iwi, for instance, who say, well, if the government's going to give me all these privileges, why wouldn't I take them?
Yeah,
of course,
great.
someone's giving you something and saying, but this doesn't need to be like this. We, in government, we settle most treaty claims more treaty claims than any other government. And these are rightings the wrongs of the past. Let's not create more wrongs now, which will never get righted. They'll never be corrected if we let this go, continue. And it's going to take some courage to reverse this behaviour. But we have to do it. And that means, standing up. And I think a few more Kiwis are starting to realise just how this government has an agenda that is not in the best interest of this country or of unity.
And look, I know personally, I'm very grateful for those people out there that are prepared to say it as it is.
Yeah.
There's not many of them. Well, not as many as there should be. What about the concept of having all of the conservation land controlled by iwi?
Yeah, no, this cannot happen. Well, as it can happen, this government can well make it happen. And as we know, we pointed out, I think you did as well, Bruce. We both pointed out earlier this year that there was consultation going on by the Department of Internal Affairs and DOC and certain iwi about how iwi were going to take over the management and control of all DOC land. Now that's 85%, as you know, of the West Coast. That's 85%. Now, most people will say, well, our local iwi are great, we get along well, it's all fine. Yeah, until you can't actually access stuff. Now, DOC is bad enough, but at least it's owned by us all. And that's the big difference, isn't it? So I think it is an extraordinary situation that a government can be so arrogant to think that they can take enormous assets of people and then just pass them over, and they'll call it management or governance. It's actually ownership. You can't sell it, but you can do everything else with it.
Can't mortgage it. It's gone off your balance sheet, and every ratepayer in New Zealand will see that if this daft thing goes ahead, they'll have an extraordinary loss of the money that they've put in. In the case of Westland, it's $74.090 million.
Yep.
$74 million. It's huge. Judith, we're kind of fighting for one people, one vote. It's democracy, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I know so actually. Democracy has to mean, one adult vote means the same as one other adult vote. It cannot be anything other than that. And, I've heard that there are people who want to talk about how that's not really fair. Well, yes, it is fair. And say, well, but that's the majority gets to decide for the minority. Well, yes, that is democracy. And the alternative is what? The minority chooses for the majority. It is really important that we remember that when the minority gets to choose the majority, that is a totalitarian system. And that is not democracy. Democracy is, I think as Winston Churchill used to say, and I'm trying not to paraphrase him too much, it's the worst system in the world of government until you look at the alternatives. And the alternatives are all bad. So let's just stick with democracy. It served us well. And if only, people hadn't chosen MMP, it could serve us even better.
Exactly. Now, Judith, just before we wrap up, it looks like James Shaw might have got the dates wrong for that thing he went. It was somewhere over in Glasgow or somewhere, wasn't it?
So this was this thing called COP26, which is the climate challenges and the planning. It appears that James Shaw may have got the dates wrong, and so as everyone else is leaving, he's turning up. So I'm not sure that he will actually now go to Glasgow. I'm sorry. This is one of those things, Bruce, you couldn't make up. It is almost Monty Pythonish, isn't it? Joe Biden's been.
Poor old Joe went to sleep, but James had 16 people there to keep an eye on his diary.
Yep, as I've said, couldn't organise the proverbial in a brewery.
I love it. Well, look, Judith, thank you so much for your time today. You're very popular here on the coast, and I know that Tova won't like to hear that. But look, which radio station is it? That offshore one that she's joining?
Yes, something like that. I think she's trying to go head to head against Mike Hosking on News Talk ZB. Well, I know who I'd put my money on.
Good luck on that. He's a bit of a straight shooter, that fella.
That's right. Well, that's why he's popular.
That's it. Well, Judith, thank you so much. Love the opportunity again in the future to do it again, and enjoy your day. Hey, it's beautiful out there, and we'll catch you later.
Thank you, Bruce. Lovely to talk.